Thank you very much, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Beavercreek Board of Zoning Appeals for today, May the 8th, 2019, 6 p.m. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Archibald?
Here.
Mr. Botla?
Yes.
Mr. Durr?
Yep.
Mr. Hung?
Present. Great. I'm presuming that everyone on the board has had a chance to look over our agenda for today. Let's see if we can get a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda. Seconded.
A quick second by Mr. Archibald. Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So before we get into business, we need to do some administrivia to begin with. This is the first time we've met, I think, in this term, so we need to do some reorganization business first. I'd like to see if there's any nominations for chair for the BZA in this session.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Dewar.
For chair.
I'm sorry, not for chair. Mr. Hunt for chair. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any second nomination?
Second.
Anyone else want to be chair? Nope. I guess we need to have a vote. All in favor of appointing Mr. Hung as chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I will be chair again. But we also need a vice chairman who, in the event that the chair shall not be available or otherwise cannot serve as chair, thereby becomes chair. Do I have any nominations for vice chairman?
Let me jump in with my nomination again, Mr. Dewar for vice chair.
Do I have a second of the nomination, Mr. Dewar?
I second.
Mr. Butler seconds that. Can I have a vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations, Mr. Dewar. Welcome to the club. There being no other matters regarding reorganization, may I have a motion to close reorganization?
Motion to close reorganization.
Second?
Yes.
Mr. Butler seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carries. Okay. I presume again that everyone's had a chance to look over the minutes for our last meeting of October the 10th, 2018. I will note that only myself and Mr. Dewar were there, so I guess we're the only people who can approve the minutes as they have been printed. Do I have a motion for approval of those minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Butler seconds. I've read it. All in favor of to approve the minutes, say aye.
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 And there we go. So, minutes are approved. We can now move on to the public hearing portion. And I believe the first one is case V-19-1, Cherry Hill Shopping Center at 3979 Indian Ripple Road. Ms. Gilly, can I have you read the legal ad?
This is case number V-19-1 on an application filed by Kathy Johnson, Sign Dynamics, 2781 Thunderhawk Court, Dayton, Ohio, 45414. The applicant is requesting a variance from Chapter 158.152B4 of the City of Beavercreek zoning code, requesting permission to construct a ground sign that exceeds the height requirement in a B2 district. The property is located at 3979 Indian Ripple Road, further described as Book 3, page 21, parcel 132 on the Greene County Property Tax Atlas.
Thank you very much. If I could please have the applicant come to the podium, please, to provide his or her justification for the variance request. Before you begin, though, there's a little bit of a script right in front of you. If you can just read that and put your name and address, I believe, in there as needed. We just need to get that on the record.
I, Jeffrey Beck of 2781 Thunderhawk Court, affirm that the testimony I'm about to give before the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Beavercreek and the whole truth to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, again, my name is Jeffrey Beck. I'm the owner and president of Sign Dynamics. We are the sign company that's been commissioned and contracted to deal with this situation. We are the designer of the sign, we are the fabricators, and we're the installation company all in one. Basically what it is, it's pretty simple. We've been hired by Blade Cutters, and Blade Cutters has been working with the landlord. They have an existing smaller ground sign, real low. They have multi-tenants. They have more tenants they had before. They're widening the road. I guess even a couple of tenants have complained to the owner saying, well, our business is down. No one can see us. I mean, we're so far off the street and everything. To be honest with you, a multi-tenant sign, if you see most of them around the counties, Montgomery, Greene, Clark, whatever, they're huge. And what we're saying is the rule on this sign, I don't know if when we filed for it, if everybody understood, it's not just a regular one-name sign. It's a multi-tenant sign with a bunch of names. And I probably would do it if I was the landlord. I'd say I want it 10 feet, 12 feet high so you can see it. We're asking from a rule that is 5 feet just to make it less than 1.5 feet, 6 foot 5 inches additional in height. That's it. It's very simple.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, staff come up here and give a report.
I'm going to read this statement real quick because apparently I should be reading it from now on. So, I, Sandra Pereira, 1368 Research Park Drive, affirm that the testimony that I'm about to give before the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Beavercreek is the whole truth to the best of my knowledge. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the BZA. The applicant is requesting approval of a ground sign that would exceed the maximum allowed height within a B2 community business district by 1.5 feet, and also the maximum square footage permitted in a B2 zoning district by 3.3 square feet. So the property under discussion is located at 3979 Indian Ripple Road, which is just one lot east of the Indian Ripple Road, Darst Road intersection, right next door to the Speedway. As you can see in the aerial photo, this is the old Speedway, so we haven't gotten the updated aerials yet that show the new Speedway on site. So within a B2 zoning district, the property is permitted a 25 square foot per side sign, 50 square feet total, with a maximum height of 5 feet. The existing sign that's located there, which you see here, is approximately 4.9 feet. I believe I measured it all the way to the peak, and then it's 20 square feet per side. So when the new Speedway was in the development phase, we received concern, the applicant, the owner actually, expressed some concerns about the repositioning of the Speedway. I mean, if you go back, look at the picture, the Speedway was facing this way. The new Speedway is actually located over on this side, and it does block these tenants here. I think I do have a photo here. So there are actually 3 tenants that go back along behind the new Speedway here. And so the owner had made some concerns about that at Planning Commission, City Council, and we took note of those. And then once the Speedway was constructed, we actually did receive some complaints from the tenants saying that they didn't have any visibility and they wanted to know what they could do. And then Mr. Scott called us and we discussed kind of their options. So what the applicant is proposing is this new ground sign, which is approximately 26.65 square feet per side. So the way we measure the actual square footage of this sign is we draw a box around all the lettering, not including the address. And that's what we use as the square footage. So it's 26.65 per side, which normally is permitted to be 25. And then it's 6.5 feet tall. So kind of to account for this stone base, and then also the address above it, sorry. One of the other items that I think we should probably discuss is the signage for the Speedway next door. So the reason that the sign that Speedway has there, which is actually 10 feet tall, I believe it was 100 square feet per side, if I remember correctly, is that the Speedway is actually located in a planned unit development. So they have different sign criteria than the standard B2, B3, B4 zoning districts. And one of the things that they needed to work into their signage was some additional space for Kettering Medical, which is located behind it. They did some land swapping, and that was part of the agreement. So that's kind of why that sign, like you go out there and you're like, okay, look at this sign. And you can see actually their sign behind it is right here. So, when we looked at all this and we talked to Mr. Scott and took the tenants' concerns into consideration, staff does believe that this variance is justified and is recommending approval with the conditions in the attached resolution. And if you have any questions, I can answer those following the public hearing.
Thank you very much. That being the staff report, is there anyone else in the crowd out there that would like to speak on regarding this particular application before the board?
Hi, I'm John Scott. I'm the owner. I'm 3125 Peoples Road, Troy, Ohio.
Okay, can you read the script that's in front of
Okay.
you too, so we can get your testimony in?
The testimony that I'm about to give before the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Beavercreek is whole truth and nothing but the truth to my knowledge. John
Thank you.
Scott. In 3125 Peoples Road, Troy, Ohio. I own the shopping center, and a lot of, when they originally planned to build Speedway, one of the things I had a concern about, a lot of my tenants, they lost visibility from the way Speedway was built, whereas before you were able to see underneath the canopy and get a lot of the tenants, they still had visibility from the road. A couple of the ones that are on the side told me their business is down about 35 to 40%. You know, it's hard to say, is it directly related? You know, is it the economy? You know, that they can't put anything on it. One of the, we're trying to put something on the front where everybody would have visibility. And it wouldn't be so small that you'd have to squint. Also, the road is wide now, so you know, if you're driving by on the other side of the road, you'd have to be able to see, you know, both sides in order to get in there. Other than that, it's, you know, it's well maintained. I think the sign looks good. Yeah, and Speedway sign, their new sign almost blocks our little sign now, so that's kind of the other reason too. So I can answer any questions if you have them. No, all right. Okay.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak regarding this application? Seeing that there are none, I'd like to ask the clerk if there was any written input that she received.
Yes, there was written input for this case. The members of BZA received a copy of an email from Fred Rowland, who was opposing the variance request.
People on the, I'm just going to ask the people on the board, did you have a copy of Mr. Rowland's? Okay. Okay. Is there anyone else that want to speak? There being none, I will close this portion of the public hearing to allow the board to discuss and ask questions. Mr. Archibald, did you want to begin?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question for Sandra, if you have a, regarding Mr. Rowland's letter, he expressed some concern about the sign blocking visibility to, you know, for access from the parking lot to Indian Ripple Road. Thoughts? I mean,
I actually spoke to him on the phone. He is across the street, so I'm not sure what his concern is exactly. What we do require is that the sign be located at least 5 feet back from the right-of-way.
okay.
Plus, it cannot create a line-of-sight obstruction. So if, I mean, even with the 100-foot Speedway sign when I was out there, I didn't have any issues. Like, we make sure that they're set back far enough that you can pull out and not have any issues. So, and we require an inspection, you know, before they get their permit, so that the inspector can go out and take a look and make sure that everything's good. So, I believe, you know, his other concern was that there's a lot of clutter along Indian Ripple, and we have been working to cut down on some of the. There's been an increase in the number of temporary signs that have been going up recently, especially along Indian Ripple Road, and our zoning inspector's actually been going out on weekends now and picking those up, so hopefully that helps a little bit with that sign clutter that he's concerned about.
Okay, and one last question. Is the location for the new sign basically the same location as the old sign?
Yeah, the proposal right now is that it be in the same location. It needs to be 5 feet back from the right-of-way, though.
Right.
And so when the road was widened, the right-of-way was widened, so that'll be something that they need to make sure of, and we will make sure of when they apply for their permit, that it does keep that 5-foot right-of-way. Yeah, so here's the right-of-way now. So it needs to be 5 feet back from this blue line. It looks like they should be fine here, but we'll take a better look, and if it's not, they'll just have to pull it back a little bit more.
And it looks like that blue line runs on the sidewalk, right? Right in front of it?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's usually, it goes, yes, the blue line is usually right behind the sidewalk.
Okay.
So, The sidewalk is usually in the right-of-way.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions. This seems like a reasonable request to me.
Mr. Butler, do you have any questions?
Sorry. This individual, James Rowland, does he live nearby?
I believe he has a business across the street here. You can see down Harbert Drive.
Oh, okay.
So he has a business down here.
I see. Now, I did drive by, and I actually pulled in the parking lot, and they're all small businesses, 8 and 10, I think. I really kind of sympathize with them. They need to have a taller sign because the sign is hidden.
Yes.
And so any help you can give will be appreciated.
Yep, we agree.
Mr. Dorr, any comments, questions?
Just a quick comment. When scouting out the location, driving eastbound along Indian Ripple, it was just abundantly obvious that you can't see the existing sign. This makes a lot of sense to me. It doesn't look like a major variance. It's very small, so this all makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, there being no more discussion, I'd like to call for a motion approving of the resolution for case V19-1, which approves the application for a variance under the condition that a permanent sign permit must be approved by Planning and Zoning Department prior to the construction of the accessory structure. Does anyone have such a motion?
Motion to approve?
Anyone second?
I second.
Mr. Butler seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, the variance is granted. Next application.
You're welcome.
Thank you. The next application is for V-19-2. And second, this is application by Mr. William Daniels, Jr. of 2154 Marchfield Way, Beavercreek, Ohio, 45434. Will you please read the ad?
This is case number V19-2 on an application filed by Williams Daniels Jr., 2154 Marchfield Way, Beavercreek, Ohio, 45434. The applicant is requesting a variance from Chapter 158.104A of the City of Beavercreek zoning code, requesting permission to construct a ground-mounted solar panel in the required 10-foot rear yard setback in an RPUD district. The property is located at 2154 Marchfield Way, further described as Book 5, page 24, parcel 91 on the Greene County Property Tax Atlas.
Thank you very much. If I can have the applicant come forward and give testimony as to why this variance should be approved.
I, William Daniels Jr., affirm that the testimony that I am about to give before the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Beavercreek is the whole truth to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you. Proceed.
What I'm requesting is we want to put a ground-mounted solar array in our backyard. I actually put solar on our business and put it on the top of our house. This is the other half of the house project. Everything's been approved, but with the setback, with it being 10 foot off the rear property line, it creates a situation where it's a lot higher in the yard because we have a pool back there and they built up the ground around the pool. So two things are happening that I wasn't happy with. They were getting ready to lay everything out and they had everything set. And it's like, this isn't going to look good. It's going to set up a lot higher and we were going to have to cut back some of the panels. So the obvious solution was to move it back into the lower area because it's going to be a lot more hidden by the trees in the neighbor's yard, which are right up on the property line. And some of those are evergreens and, it'll protect it or kind of hide it, conceal it year round. And the other thing is we'll be able to put, a good size, an appropriate size array that'll accomplish what we wanted to accomplish when we first decided to proceed with the project. So the only objection I've heard so far is about how high it's going to be and whether the neighbor's going to see it. And this solution obviously addresses that and makes it a lot lower and a lot less visible. So it's going to accomplish two things: make it a lot less noticeable and allow us to have the size of the system that we'd like to have in an area of the yard that isn't going to be used for anything else. So.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you is an application requesting approval of a variance to allow for a 7-foot encroachment into the required 10-foot rear yard setback in order to install solar panels within an RPUD residential plan unit development. Property under discussion is located at 2154 Marchfield Way, which is within Hunter's Ridge, Section 11. The property right now has a zoning designation of RPUD, which is residential plan unit development, which basically means that this development has specific requirements that have to be met for all new construction. However, the requirements for accessory structures, which solar panels do fall under the accessory structure requirements, still have to meet the standard setbacks, which are 10 feet from any side and rear property line. So, as shown in this attached plan, the applicant is proposing to install the solar panels approximately 3 feet from that rear property line. And the panels would be nearly 50 feet wide, 50 feet long, and 12 feet wide. So as the applicant stated, he did receive permit approval from the planning department for panels on his roof as well as panels in the rear yard. At that time, the panels that he was proposing would be 10 feet from the rear property line. This is the approved plat, the record plan for Hunter's Ridge Section 11, and you can see the area that's highlighted yellow. There's actually a 15-foot drainage easement at the rear of Mr. Daniels' property. So Mr. Daniels had to actually get additional approval from the engineering department in order to be able to locate those solar panels 5 feet into that 15-foot setback, still 10 feet from that rear property line. So after the applicant received the approval, we received a call from the solar panel company, and they stated that they wanted to move them closer to the property line because at the request of Mr. Daniels, and we let them know that he would need to apply for a variance for that. After reviewing the applicant's request, staff feels that allowing a 7-foot encroachment into the required 10-foot rear yard setback is excessive. As most of you are aware, one of the things that we look at when we're looking at variances is whether or not the applicant can meet the requirements of the code. If the applicant can meet the requirements of the code, we can't. Staff cannot recommend approval of a variance. And as the applicant has stated, he can meet those requirements, whether they have to sit a little bit higher or he doesn't like the way they look is really not something that staff can take into consideration. It does appear that there may be other locations that the applicant could put his solar array as well, which, if the applicant has other options, those options have to be exhausted before seeking a variance. Based on that information, staff does not recommend approval of this request, and that is outlined in the attached resolution, and I can answer any questions you have following the public hearing.
Thank you very much. That being said, is there anyone else in the audience that wants to speak on this particular application tonight?
Hello.
Hello.
I am Pat Barton, and I affirm that the testimony that I am about to give before the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Beavercreek is the whole truth and to the best of my knowledge.
Ms. Barton, what's your address?
2109 Wedgwood Drive.
Okay.
I'm within 500 feet of Mr. Daniels.
Proceed.
I've lived in Hunter's Ridge over 18 years, and I've found that I've enjoyed living there because Hunter's Ridge follows all requirements of the city as well as the HOA, and very, very, very few exceptions have been made, so the neighborhood looks nice and laid out. I've also served on the Board of Trustee for a couple of years, so I know how hard it is when people do want exceptions for fencing, pools, sheds, parking for both trailers and boats and such. And the HOA does follow their guidelines and such. I'm not a trained lawyer. I've read the covenants. There is discussion about having no satellite dishes and such, and I think that in the whole spirit of the HOA and the community, a grounded solar panel of that magnitude just doesn't fit. I think it's a slippery slope when the city grants exceptions when the HOA has been following city guidelines and such. I think the community would be more attractive, not sticking with the 10-foot offset, and I'd like to recommend no to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing anyone else in the audience tonight, so I'll presume that there's no more people. Does the clerk know if there's any written input that's been received on this?
Yes, there were multiple emails that each member of the board received. They were from David and Mary Beth Foley of 2125 Wedgwood Drive, David Grove, Ryan Hyder of 2087 Marchfield Way, Aaron Schaefer of 2087 Marchfield Way, Pat Barton of 2109 Wedgwood Drive, Annette Poff of 2179 Wedgwood Drive, David and Susan Trainum of 2135 Wedgwood Drive, and they were all opposing the variance request.
Thank you very much. There being no other written input and seeing no one else in the crowd, I will go ahead and close the public hearing portion of this and open up board discussion at this time for questions from the board members. Mr. Archibald, if you'd like to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did we receive any input from the HOA concerning this?
We didn't receive any official input. I spoke to a couple of members of the HOA on a couple of occasions. The city does not enforce the covenants of an HOA.
Sure.
So even if the HOA said you cannot have a swimming pool or you cannot have solar panels, the city will approve permits for swimming pools and solar panels. Those covenants are the duties of the HOA to enforce, not the city of Beavercreek.
Okay.
And I let them know that.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Sandra. Mr. Daniels, I have a couple questions for you.
Yes.
You step up.
Yes.
Taking all this into consideration, we've heard that your reasoning for putting them so far back to your property line was to reduce the height so that it would be less of a visible burden to your neighbors, right? And so would you, how tall are these, and is there any opportunity to reduce the height of those?
Well, they're limited to 8 feet by the zoning code and by city regulations. So we're meeting all the requirements. What's surprising to me is that I didn't like how high they were going to be, and I stopped the project. We had everything approved. It could be, sitting up 2.5 feet higher than what my proposal is right now. And it seems like the people that are against it are against solar panels, not, and it's already been approved. It really seems like it doesn't have anything to do with my variance request, because my variance request is actually very consistent with a lot of these concerns about making them less visible. But right
now I'm just asking a question about the height of the solar panel. So you said the minimum height is 8 feet?
No, the maximum height is 8 feet.
Okay.
So they're not going to be any higher than that.
My question is, can they be lower?
With the angle that it has to be, with the azimuth, they have to be tilted at a certain angle, and to have, the array that is approved there, I don't think it can be much shorter than that. I don't think it's going to push totally up to the 8 foot, but I'd like to have that 8 feet from the ground room to work, like the code says.
Okay, and it also sounds like your approval from the Planning Commission was that you could size these and position these so that it could work without encroaching on the setback requirements.
Well, then we run into cutting down on the size of the solar array, and it makes it a lot less feasible to do it. And like I said, the solution I proposed, I thought, was forward-thinking with taking into consideration the neighbors. I mean, we've got every intention of being a good neighbor. We've been there over 10 years.
Sure.
And plan on and staying there a long time, which is part of why we want to put solar in. But I'm really surprised that everybody wants us to put in what is clearly a inferior setup than what we could have by moving them back closer to the fence.
So, again, I'm not an expert on solar, but
Yeah.
that array seems to be pretty big, and you already have panels on your house roof, right?
Yeah.
And is there a reason that they need to be that big? I mean,
That's
can they provide, your electricity and everything be
Yeah,
made
we-
smaller?
Well, we sized it based on what our electrical needs were, and it winds up being, I think, about, well, DP&L has the final say on the size. Ohio has what they call net metering laws, where the DP&L is required to pay back
Right.
for power that you put back into the grid. They come and install a two-way meter.
Right.
And they measure that. So they regulate the size that we can put in. And we didn't go to the maximum size that we could put in. We went to what the solar installer said was probably about 85% of our usage. And we're going to try to get the rest of that through conservation and cutting back on our usage. So, the idea is looking forward for the next 25 years, when my wife and I get into our retirement years and our fixed income years, it makes really good financial sense to cut back on our, mandatory expenses. And with the property taxes and everything, we really want to stay here. So,
Right.
part of the calculus that went into this was, how do we pay the property taxes, which probably aren't going to go down, and cut our fixed expenses? And the solar made a lot of sense. Plus, I really like the environmental side of it. It's not a pure economic decision. It's not that good of an investment, but it's good enough. I think we've reached the point where it makes sense, and it's going to be some savings, hopefully. Time will tell. You get told things by solar companies, and you hope they're true. But our plan was to go solar and to have it, be a decent, reasonable return, and at the same time, put it in the best place where it's not going to be as noticeable.
Sure. So just from Dan Archibald's own personal perspective, having been on BZA before and been on the planning commission before, we take very seriously people wanting to encroach into the setbacks. I mean, they're there for a very valid reason, and if there's any way that can be reconfigured to not encroach into that setback. I mean, it's well encroached into the setback. It's almost on the property line. I might be compelled to be more in favor of it, but I'll let my other board members have their turn.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Butler, do you have any questions?
First of all, let me thank to Miss Path, Annette Path, yeah, for coming forward and showing your concern. You have a legitimate concern, along with the other 6 more people have expressed the opinion. So thank you very much for coming forward.
Thank you.
Now back to Mr. Daniels. Yeah, I'm an engineer by profession.
Yes.
I do not see that house of your size need so many panels. You have a panel on top of your roof. Now you're planning to have 50 by 12 in the backyard. That's a huge panel. And first of all, it's unsightly. It will reduce the property of your neighborhood. And it's just not wanted. If you are living in some rural area, farm or something, then you can have anything you want. But this is, your lot is only half acre or something, and you got a swimming pool and other thing. And having such a huge panel, I don't want to live next door, by the way. It will be just, a little more defiance. they do look not so good, and the noise and that neighborhood early morning, some get up in the backyard and say, what is this one? It doesn't give a good picture. So if you want to have panel, you can reduce it, make it two tire, make on your right side or left side, or bring to nearer to your pole. But definitely that encroachment, in my opinion, is not acceptable.
Well, if I could address your concerns, with all due respect, different people, particularly younger generation of people, have a different perception of solar panels. They look at them and they see something quite positive, and they understand that it's taking thousands of pounds of carbon out of the air and doing very positive things. So I think there's a great number of people that find them, frankly, attractive because of what they represent. And in our case, if we put them more in the center of the yard and we move them closer to the house, then we have shading issues because the house faces south, and where we're at in the northern hemisphere, we have to have south-facing solar panels. So we're in a situation where we have to have them back far enough away from the house in order to collect the sun properly. And I don't see why the thought is that we can move things around and put them in different places. If you went to my house and you walked in the backyard, it would jump right out at you and you'd say, oh, that's clearly the best place for these. They're going to be tucked in, there's all kind of foliage behind them, and it makes the most sense. And it's going to be the lowest place to put them in the yard.
I think you're looking for your benefit. In my neighborhood, I live in Spicer Heights area. There's one house has solar panel on the roof.
Yeah.
And he even extra power he sells to DPNL. And your house is bigger than their roof-wise, roof surface area. And so my question is that if your roof surface that cannot cover the solar panel you are planning, then either you have to cut back or find out different options that can meet your 85% in a need. And honestly, that zoning board, what they have decided, I think I agree with them that encroachment and huge panel in the backyard and unsightly condition to neighborhood is just not the way to go.
Well, again, one of the things to keep in mind is that, like I said, it's going to be the best fit for it. It's going to be the one that I think, out of everyone's concerns about not wanting to see it, it'll be the best place for it. And I don't really see any reasonable alternatives. And we simply want to use part of the yard where, as was mentioned earlier, in the drainage area, it's going to be on posts and it's going to be up off the ground, which is why, the talks I had with the city engineers, they said that's, acceptable. It's not going to do anything to impede the flow of the drainage. So I can't put any structure on the ground back there. I can't use my property because of that. But this is a way that I can do that. I can get some productive use out of my property and at the same time appease some of the people that have problems with seeing it. So, my concern is we'd like to put it to some good use, and I think this has positive environmental impacts. Every study I've seen has shown property value increases because of the trend of people, respecting solar and appreciating it. So I'm a little taken aback by some of the resistance.
My last statement only, that I think what you said, you're looking from your angle, from your comfort or your views, but that view would not necessarily is the view of your neighborhood, and frankly is not my view either. So
One more thing that I think is important to mention. I was very impressed with the city of Beavercreek and the regulations they have about solar, because I thought it was very forward-thinking. They have in, the regulations, restrictions on how much of your yard your neighbors can shade. My neighbors can't, if I have solar, they can't have big trees and things that will shade my property. And I thought that was incredibly forward-thinking, and that was a very positive, encouraging thing for people that wanted to put solar in. Like I said, it's got a societal benefit beyond my personal benefit. And frankly, I'm paying a bit of a premium. It's not a real slam dunk great investment, but it has that side of it too. So I think, like I said, I'm surprised that Beavercreek wasn't more, accepting of this because of very forward-thinking things in the regulations about solar.
Mr. Chair, I'm done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Butler. Mr. Doerr?
Yeah, thank you for your application, and I'm in agreement with you to a point in terms of the environmental impact, the importance of solar energy. I do have a range of questions. So in driving by, is your fence 72 inches, 6 feet tall? It was tough to tell from the car, so
Yeah, it was a requirement when we put the pool in.
Yes, I believe that's the Beavercreek standard. So this solar panel would be at 96 inches, at 8 feet?
Potentially, yes.
Vis-a-vis 72?
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned that it has to be tilted in some manner. Does that go above the 96 inches? Would it potentially extend to 108?
It'll stay under that.
So everything would be under 96?
Yes.
But that's still 2 feet above the fence line?
Right, which is what the city code is, yeah.
And the trees in the back, again, I had no sense of being able to see that. How tall roughly are those trees in terms of blocking?
There's large evergreen trees to, if you're looking at the back fence to the left of it, that, year-round block probably about 20% of the fence line, and they're 20, 30 feet tall. Okay, and then the bushes, there's a thick line of shrubs down the rest of it. They grow over the fence, we have to cut them. It's no big deal. We're neighbors. I mean, it looks nice. They're probably I would say they're easily 2 feet over the fence, and they grow and they get bigger every year. And that covers the rest of the fence line. And then just short of the property line, there are more trees in the neighbor's yard. And they've grown quite big in the 10 years we've been there. And there's some evergreens there. There's some evergreen bushes entirely along my, again, looking toward the back fence, the right-hand neighbor, the Gallagher's home. They were, small when they moved in, and 10 years later, they're above the fence line now. So we've got lots of natural, cover, and the more we push that back toward that back fence, the more that is going to be hidden.
I haven't had the chance to read your HOA covenant. Staff said that it doesn't impact it, but hypothetically it does have a legal impact on your community. To my understanding, there's no prohibition on solar panels in there, but some have stated in their letters that it does infringe upon the spirit of the HOA covenant. Ms. Barton, would you? It does infringe upon the spirit. Okay.
Different objects and satellite dishes and such.
Sure.
Allowed.
Okay. I would encourage the HOA to make a correction to the covenant, because Mr. Daniels is abiding by the rules under the HOA. My last question for Mr. Daniels is that under Section 158, pardon me for a second.
104.
I appreciated your letter because it addressed the 8 different components under 158.172. But my concern is that point 6 says the granting of the variance will not infringe upon the rights and quiet and enjoyment of adjacent property owners and will not diminish property values, endanger the public safety, or create public nuisance. My concern is 7 neighbors in opposition. It sounds like an awfully large number. Are these neighbors that are adjacent directly, or are they generally down the street that have an opposition to solar panels? Are you, any of your direct neighbors opposed? Because I see addresses on both Marchfield and Wedgwood, so it strikes me as a large number in opposition, sir.
I don't know. I haven't been privy to any of those, so I really couldn't tell you. I do know that Pat is about 3 properties removed, and yeah, I don't understand the concern, because I think it'd be very hard with all the trees and where, you know, the location that we're proposing for her to even see them. So,
I have a line of sight,
Okay,
your back fence.
sure.
oh, okay,
I have a photograph,
okay.
Okay.
and some of the neighbors are directly behind Mr. Daniels.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate the input, and I'm through with my questions.
So, Mr. Daniels, if you don't mind, I'm just going to ask a series of questions.
Sure.
I'm a dreadful sinner. I'm a lawyer. So that means this is just the way I process things, so I apologize if I seem a little bit obtuse. My first question for you is this. You clearly had a plan before which respected the 10-foot setback, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, and that was the original plan, and that was a plan that you reviewed with the county engineer to make sure that the drainage easement wouldn't be disturbed or affected in any way, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What's unclear to me is the specific reasons why you've deviated from that plan. Was the original plan infeasible or impossible?
The original plan, until we got it laid out, until we went and put stakes in the ground, I didn't realize how far up the hill in the backyard it was going to be, how high it was going to sit, and how much we would have to, cut down on the size of it. So, like a lot of projects, when you get into the middle of them, you realize, as much planning as we did, this isn't the best solution.
Okay. That being said, would you agree with me then that it sounds like, based on what you just told me, and I could be wrong, but you decided to make the panels a little bit larger and then move it closer to the fence line?
No.
Okay. So is it the same, does the original plan use the same size panel?
Yeah. Both the city and our solar company were basing things off the satellite images from and once you got there and got your feet on the ground, it didn't look like it was going to be the best solution. Didn't look like it was going to be the best fit, and moving it back really seemed to be the obvious answer.
So let's say we were to go back to the original plan, so where you originally located the panel, would there be a decrease in the capacity that the panel would be then, or that you would then be able to enjoy, or would you still be getting the same amount of power, I guess, per day from your panels?
We would have to cut it back in size,
okay,
to make it fit once we, like I said, laid it out. And again, we wouldn't have to do that if we were able to move it back.
Okay. If you cut the size of the panels down, what would the effect be upon the amount of electricity that would be covered by your solar panel plan?
It could be, a 20% reduction, which really drops the rate of return to the point where, it's not a feasible project. And the project was based on doing both components of it, the backyard array and the rooftop.
Okay. Right now with the rooftop array, how much of your power consumption does that handle?
We're only a couple months into it, and it's taken a long time for DP&L to process the net meter and to get it there. So I wish I did. I wish we were a week later. I'd have my next bill and I'd be able to tell you much more clearly. But I can't answer that honestly.
So would you agree with me that it's possible then that the net return or the estimates you're making as to the amount of power consumption that would be covered by the proposed plan, or even by the original plan, I should say, by the original plan, isn't it possible that you could have all your energy needs met by the original plan?
Well, the original plan, like I said, once we got out there, is going to have to be scaled back if we keep it in the 10-foot with a 10-foot setback.
I understand that, but given that right now you don't know, you really can't, at least from what you just told me, you're not sure how much of your consumption is taken care of by your current solar panel array. Isn't it true then that even if you had a smaller array, it's still feasible that you could have 75, 80% of your power needs covered? Or is that an impossibility?
Well, you asked me if I could give you hard numbers.
Yeah.
And I can't give you hard numbers. I can give you the estimates. And the
Sure.
estimates say exactly what I'm saying, that if we cut down the size of it, then the return's going to be lower. So, like in any planning stage, we're basing things on the estimates.
If we were to, so what I'm hearing then is that unless you get this variance, you would not be able to move forward on your project. Is that what you're telling us today?
There's a possibility. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't expect it to be a problem. I thought that it made the most sense to do what we want to do. So I haven't thought forward to that, and haven't talked again to the solar company. They've moved on and are doing other installations, and they're waiting for me to get back in touch with them after this meeting. So.
Okay. Okay, I don't know if they've got any more questions for you, Mr. Danos. Thanks. Does anyone else have any more questions?
No,
Mr. Butler.
Now, knowing fully that 10-foot setback is the law, regulation of the city, why did not you convey to your solar designer that this is my constraint and come up with different options that meet your 85% consumption? Why did you assume that that city will agree to, and I don't know, you haven't bought yet, you don't have the panel yet, right?
They're waiting to be installed, so.
You mean you already bought it?
Well, we thought that the plan was going to work, and I stopped the project because I didn't like how high it was going to sit up, and I knew that might be a problem, and it seemed like, frankly, an elegant solution to move it back and address possible neighbor concerns as well as meet the sizing requirements that we were hoping for. So it seems like any objection that we're hearing is based on solar, not on where we're going to put these, because it's very, very clear, especially if you went out and looked, that putting them where I want to put them makes the most sense for everybody involved. And that's why I requested the variance. I could have let them go ahead and put them in, and they'd be sticking up 2.5 feet higher, meeting the 8-foot requirement off the ground, but they'd be higher in the yard. I didn't like how that was going to look, and it seemed to me that it would be a very obvious solution to just move them back. And we're going to have 3 feet off the fence, which is wider than most doorways to do any kind of maintenance or whatever. It, makes it very, very far from the property line when it comes to, any kind of property line disputes or something. My neighbor has, a huge line of bushes and trees right on the property line. So I'm a little taken aback again at why there's such resistance, because this seems like the obvious and best solution to what we want to do.
Now, bushes and trees are beautiful, look good, green. Don't compare with the solar panel. They are different things.
Some people look at solar
But
panels and see very positive things too.
I want to say your assumption that city will agree to, and you went ahead in planning. So I would say that if you want to have extra power, that the one you have on the roof does not meet your requirement, you need additional. That's your issue. But then you need to ask your designer to come up with different option that does not encroach those 10-foot setback which city has it.
Well, another thing to consider from the legal point of view, and I'm not an attorney, but I've got a section in my backyard that we can't use for anything. We can't put a shed there or anything like that. But this use of the property meets the requirements because of the drainage easement, where it's off the ground. The engineers, I've been there 10 years. The engineers did a very good job. We've never had a problem with any kind of flooding or anything. So, it seems to me that, I'm just asking for the right to use my property in a reasonable way. There's inverse condemnation questions at a certain point, and I don't want to go down that road. I want to try to approach the city and say, what I'm asking to do is reasonable. It makes the most sense. It's the best fit for the neighbors and for myself.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the panel, the board? There being no more questions of Mr. Daniels or anyone else in the audience, I will go ahead and then and call for a motion. The first motion I'm going to call, though, is if anyone here on this board has a motion for the approval of the variance. Is there a motion for the denial of the variance?
Yes.
Mr. Batla has made a motion. Does anyone want to second the denial of the application?
I would like to second that, but I also would like to make a note that I'm opposing this based on this current plan. Not because it's solar, but because it's going into the setback. If a different plan were to come forward, I would be more in favor of it. So yes, I have a second for the
Okay.
disapproval.
Does anyone else here on the board, before we take roll call for the vote, does anyone here on the board want to, and this isn't a step for debate, this is just a discussion, does anyone want to make any other comments regarding the motion or discuss the motion between the members before we take a roll call?
Mr. Daniels, there's a lot I like about your idea. I would concur with my colleague in terms of his comments. The concern I have is that 7 of your neighbors are opposed to this, and I think if you could try to work it out internally with them to see if there's some form of solution that would fit the neighborhood, I would certainly welcome another opportunity to hear your case.
Well, going forward as is with the approved plans, I don't think it's going to make anybody happy.
Well, and that's just, I think from my point of view, and I'm looking at this from the position that I disagree with Mr. Batla. I like solar panels. I like seeing them. But then again, I'm from Canada, and we have very weird things up there, like giant windmills. I do think we're going towards a more, a new, I hope that we go towards a society where we start embracing new technologies that will help us embrace the environment a little bit more, be a little more concerned with the environment. So I very much sympathize with what you're talking about, Mr. Daniels. And, I really like your plan. I certainly, if I were your neighbor, I wouldn't oppose it. But, to be fair, and this is where I disagree with Mr. Dewar, I'm not terribly concerned with what your neighbor is saying right now, because if the HOA wanted to ban solar panels, they could have done so before, but they haven't.
Agreed.
Which suggests to me that there's at least enough people in the HOA that like the idea of having solar panels, if on the roof only or in their backyard, or at least have that option. So I'm not terribly concerned about your neighbors either. Instead, as pernicious as I am also a steward of the law. And what I do know about the law is that, from my perspective at least, there was a plan, and the plan was approved. The subdivision was approved as it was with the 10-foot setback. And I'm very, very reluctant, just as a member of this board, to grant variances of planned unit developments where the setback's very clear, and also to be flexible with adjustments of stated plans, even if, as you said, it could be for everyone's benefit. You're keeping the height down, and you're also maybe enjoying a little bit of a bigger panel, which means you're enjoying a better financial benefit. I understand that too. One of the hallmarks about variances, in my experience, is that economic issues or economic concerns are on the lowest concern, where it seems clear that the person asking for a variance has created their own plan. So it's not something that they didn't know of, they knew of a potential issue. I think maybe when this project was planned out, maybe your planner didn't consider the grading of your property. And you mentioned before that because of where the original site plan was, it's going to be a little bit higher, and that would reduce the size of the solar panel. I think that maybe the original planner didn't think this one through, I think as Mr. Butler suggested. But from my perspective, the way I look at this is that, we kind of have to be safeguards as to when we grant variances here.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing the state of the law, as it is in my books, I'm going to probably approve the staff's recommendations because you had an original plan. And if you set it up, I understand what you're saying, that you won't be happy with that, and your neighbors won't be happy about that, but that was the way the plan was approved from the city's perspective. And if your neighbors in the HOA have a problem with that, that's something for them to deal with. Or maybe they should have done it before you put up your panels because, you know, their regulations aren't necessarily retroactive.
Well, in addressing that, there isn't anything specific to solar. And frankly, the satellite dish and antenna restrictions are federally illegal. So,
Unfortunately, I can't comment as to whether or not they're overreaching their powers or not, and I don't like to put force today, but.
well, and that's not the issue here, but, you know, there were probably a number of things not well thought out, not having the foresight to think about solar in the neighborhood. And granted, in my case, once we got it on the ground, it didn't look like it was the best fit. So, and that's why I'm here. You know, I understand that setbacks are important. You know, you can drive through the neighborhood, you can look at the satellite images, and there's lots and lots of things and there's a lot of precedent established and things in the 10-foot setback, starting with, you know, my next door neighbor and their shed. But if it's reasonable, you know, I would think that's why a variance would be granted, especially if it meets the criteria of addressing the objections of, you know, pretty much everyone involved. I mean, the relevant objections, not the objections, just the solar panel.
Okay. That said, does anyone else on the panel, on the board, have anything they want to add before we take a roll call? Yes, Mr. Butler.
For the record, I'm not against solar panel. I'm pro renewable energy, but only within that constraint. And if we come up with different option and stay on your property, and that encroachment, I'm for it. Strongly believe in solar, wind, you know.
Well,
Okay.
I think,
Fossil, not non-fossil, yeah.
I think we're at a point now where we've probably been in
Yeah.
many, many times in history where new technology comes along and there's a resistance to it, and then it becomes the norm. And, you know, that's going to happen with solar. It's just too good of an idea.
Yeah.
So, you know, people's resistance to it now, I mean, you know, when we went from clay shingles to asphalt shingles, oh no, you know, that's horrible, it looks bad. You know, and here we are. So,
Well, just from my perspective, and reading through the letters of objection to your project, I didn't get the impression that people were against solar, right? They were against the way the project was going to affect the neighborhood.
it was not in my backyard, basically.
Yeah.
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 Well, respectfully, Mr. Daniels, I understand that you want to continue to discuss the matter with us, but as far as the role, like where we are in the point of
Sure.
order, this is a discussion just for the members of the board. And I don't want to cut anyone off either, but we close that portion down. And
Sure.
I kind of let it slide a little bit, but just for the sake of time, I think we have to, I mean, is there anyone else on the board that would like to discuss this motion with other members of the board? All right, well, that being said, then the current motion, just as a reminder, is a motion to deny the variance. May I have a call of the roll, please?
Mr. Durr?
Aye.
Mr. Archibald?
Aye.
Mr. Botla?
Aye.
Mr. Hung?
Aye. The motion is granted to deny the variance. That being all the business we have for today, I'd like to see if there's a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
Well, you got to make the motion first, Mr. Butler.
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Dewar makes a motion to adjourn, Mr. Butler seconds. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.